Thanks so much. Okay, so as I said, our message today is called "What Does It Mean to Believe?" Now, it's a sort of a title that might seem a little bit like, oh, yeah, we already know what it means to believe, but hopefully we'll take a bit of a different slant on what this topic is all about today. Now, I just want to use a little bit of an illustration here. I've got something here prepared for you. If I was to just show you this, what that doesn't really look like much, does it? Okay, let me show you something else. Here we go. Got something else to show you here. Now, again, it doesn't really look like much at all, does it? And maybe if I was to show you this here, again, it doesn't really look like much at all. But I guess the awesome thing about Lego is that when you're building a Lego project, you have bits and pieces that all come together, and it's not until you see the whole thing together that you get to actually see what it is that's being built. You might build the first part, and then you build the second part, and you build the third part, and then you have to put them all together. And when they're all together, it becomes something really cool and awesome that you can play with. So let me just show you. I'm going to have to move my computer here to be able to show you what it was that I was showing you. Here it is. Okay. So here is a little landscape that my kids have built, and there's lots of different parts to this landscape. Here's I believe this is the beach area. Okay, so and then over here you've got over here there's a rock climbing area, so people can go rock climbing, and here is a swimming area that they've built in, and then over here there's actually a horse stable. They've got some horses there that they can look after the horses, you see. So I guess the point is that I'm trying to get at is that until you see the full picture, you don't really understand what it is that's is being built. I guess there's a few other illustrations I could add as well to this, and this one comes from my college days, and that was oftentimes you'd see down at the Oval, there would be a lot of people, Samoan guys actually, a lot of Samoan guys playing touch rugby. And I never really appreciated the game of touch rugby until one day they actually asked me to play the game with them. And so I said, oh, okay, well, I'll give it a go. And Samoan people, they're very, very strong people. And so I went there to play with them. But I tell you what, even though they're such big people, they are fast, and they just ran past me and around me, and I couldn't appreciate the athleticism and the energy that they had until I actually went and got engaged with it myself. And I guess the third example that I'd give is friendships. When you first meet somebody, you might get to know them just a little bit, but it's not until you get to know them a lot and spend time with them a lot that you actually start to really appreciate who they are and the relationship that you've grown. And then it comes to the point where you can't even think about living your life without that person because they're such a good friend. So I guess all of these three illustrations, they have one thing in common, and that is that sometimes it takes time and it takes a complete picture for us to be able to understand and appreciate something that I'm talking about here, like an event or a person or a thing. Unless we see it in its full glory, then we don't really appreciate it as much. I guess the same thing could be said about God. However, God reveals himself to us slowly, doesn't he? I mean, we learn a little bit about God, and then we learn a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And all of those pieces together that we start to learn about God actually gives us a picture of who he is, isn't it? I mean, we learn one thing about God, we know a little bit about God, and then we learn 2 things, then we learn 3 things, then we learn 10 things, and then we start to have a picture of God that is just incredible, and we get to see who he is and the way in which he loves us so much. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit today, and what does it mean to believe? Now, as you are well aware, we are living in the end times. There's absolutely no doubt about the fact that we are living in the end times. We've been warned that trying times are in front of us, okay? Things are going to be a little bit more difficult as time goes on. We're going to be asked to stand up for our faith, okay? We're going to be challenged on our faith. We're going to be challenged particularly on the Sabbath truth at the end of time. And so these are things that are parts of our belief system that we can't throw them away. Because if we throw away a piece of our belief system, what happens is that we lose a piece of who God is, and we don't see him as clearly as what we did before. Now, there's a worrying trend in Christendom at the moment, and that is to minimize the differences between denominations. And that's a bit of a plan that's going on at the moment, that let's not worry about all of our differences. Let's not worry about the things that make us different. Let's all just get along and love each other and be united. I mean, it sounds like a really great idea, but in order to be united, what do we have to do? We have to throw away pieces of what we believe and know about God so that we can all fit together. And I'm not sure about you, but I'm not willing to throw away some of those pieces that I understand about God. Now let's go to the most well-known Bible verse probably in the Christian world. And already, as I said that, probably a verse is popping into everybody's mind. And that is John 3:16, isn't it? You're all already probably thinking about that. And that verse is a lot of people already know that verse and they can say it. I'm going to read it. It says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." Now, that's a wonderful verse, a beautiful verse, nothing wrong with the verse. But I guess the problem is that sometimes people live their whole Christian experience just like with that one verse. That one verse. Now, what does it mean to believe? In that verse, Jesus said that whoever believes in him. I mean, that's just one verse. One word. It says, whoever believes in him. I guess the problem is that we can live our whole Christian life and forget the rest of the Bible and design for ourselves what the word believe means. Can we design what the word believe means? Or do we need the rest of the Bible to help us understand what the word believe means? I mean, think about it. If I decided to design what the word believe means, I could say something like, to believe in Jesus is to be baptized for a dead person. I could say that. If I didn't have the rest of the Bible, I could say that. Or if I could say, to believe in Jesus means that you can pay money to get people out of hell. So I could make this sort of stuff up. I could design what the word believe means. Or I could say something ridiculous like, when it rains outside, which it's been doing a lot lately, that you must run out into the rain and get soaking wet. Otherwise, you're denying the blessings of God. You see, I can make up what believe means. Also, now this is a bit of a tragic one, which actually takes place a lot. Cult leaders, people who lead religious groups, say that to believe in Jesus, all the women have to, he end up gathering a heap of women around himself, and all these women are obviously doing things, filling his desires or whatever like that. So I guess what my illustration here is that if we don't have the rest of the Bible, we can design what the word believe means. And a lot of people live their whole Christian life thinking themselves what the word believe means without understanding what it actually means from the Bible. And so it's very important for us to know what it means to believe. Even more so now, seeing as though our faith will be tested. Our faith will be tested. Now, let's go to the screen, the slides. Sorry, I'm just going to put on the slides. And Brother Lucas, I'll probably leave the slides on from this point, just so that you don't have a swapping around all the time. Okay, so let me just push play on here. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so what it means to believe. We're going to our first Bible passage today. And it says here, sorry, I'm just going to have to, I can't see it properly the way my screen is set up. So I'm just going to move things around just a little bit here. Boy, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting this arranged correctly so I can see the screen. Look, I'm just going to have to do my best. Okay, so our first Bible passage for today, and there's actually 4 sections to this sermon. Number 1 being build on the rock. And as you noticed, that Marielle's song did match this. The song was all about standing on the rock. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 24, it says, "Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him unto a wise man who built his house upon the rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like," it's really hard for me to arrange both things at the same time. "He will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." Now, this is a fantastic parable. I love it because it's so simple, it's easy to understand. And for all the guys out there, it really talks to us because guys love to build. And for all the builders out there, you know how important a foundation is. And even if you're a gardener, you need a good foundation in the soil, don't you? Or if you're a painter, you understand that all the time is spent in preparation to do your painting. So I don't know you, but you like to go to the beach? Put up your hand if you like to go to the beach. We love to go to the beach, and me and the kids get together. We love to build sandcastles. My favourite one is to go right on the water's edge where the water is sort of lapping up and down the beach and build your castle there. And you know exactly what's going to happen. And that is, as you start to build your castle there, what happens? The water comes up and it starts to erode from the castle. Now, it doesn't erode from the top, does it? It starts to erode the castle from where? Underneath. And sure enough, after a little while, the water erodes it enough, and the whole thing in one go, boom, comes crashing down. Now, that's what this parable is talking about, that if we don't have a strong foundation, our whole world is going to come crashing down. Let me go to this next quote here. It says, Desire of Ages 314. To impress the lesson, he adds an illustration. It is not enough, he says, for you to hear my words. By obedience, you must make them the foundation of your character. Self is but shifting sand. If you build upon If you build upon human theories and inventions, your house will fall. By the winds of temptation, the tempests of trial, it will be swept away. But these principles that I have given you will endure. Receive me, build on my words. So having a strong foundation keeps us safe, doesn't it? It helps us to feel safe in bad weather. I remember this time when I was a young person and I liked to go camping by myself. I used to go down to a place south of West Australia and go surfing. And I took the tent with me, and I had my car, had my tent, had all my stuff inside the tent. And this particular weekend, it was really poor weather. Now, I'd set up the tent sort of, properly and well. But what happened was is that the same tent that I was using that day is the same tent that my dad would use. Now, in Western Australia, it is so hot. And so instead of sleeping inside the house, my dad would actually set up the tent in the backyard. And Dad would sleep out in the tent in the backyard to just try and get some relief from the heat inside the house. But what happens is that the top of the tent, because my dad would put up this tent every single summer, the top of the tent had become very brittle, or it had been affected by the sun. So when I went camping with the same tent, the weather turned bad. It was raining. The wind was everywhere. And the wind just ripped my tent to pieces. And so I was just stuck. I ended up driving my car in front of the tent, and I took a rope and I tied the tent to the rope, and I jumped in the car all wet. So if you've got a strong foundation and you've got a nice strong house around you, when there's bad weather like there is today, you feel safe, don't you? Because you've got a strong foundation. You don't have to question whether you're right or wrong. When your foundation is strong, your belief system is strong, we can stand strong. Let's go to the next Bible verse now, Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 4. It says, that we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, in the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting, but speaking the truth in love, may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ. So our belief system needs to be grounded in the Bible, isn't it? When our belief system makes sense, it makes moral sense, it fits with the other parts of the Bible, it lifts up Jesus, and it presents God in the correct light, then we know we can have confidence in the scriptures. Now, my second point today is that the truth shows us who Jesus is. First point, build on the rock. Okay? Second point, the truth shows us who Jesus is. Now, believing the truth isn't just about being secure in stormy weather. It's not just being secure when there's lots of other doctrine flying around. There's more to being to the truth than that. And I already told you a little bit about this, and that is that the truth gives us a picture of who? It gives us a picture of Jesus Christ and God, a clear picture. The truth gives us that clear picture. Now, from the beginning, Satan has tried to distract us and to give us a wrong picture of God. Isn't that true? From the beginning, he has tried to misrepresent the character of God. He's tried to lessen the importance of obedience and also sin. He's tried to destroy the law of God and also to distract us from the great controversy. It's the plan of Satan to represent God in as poor a light as possible, to make people to serve God out of fear and out of ritual, not serve God out of a position of love. And the twisted thing is that Satan does all of this through the disguise of a church. He goes in the form of a church and uses churches to twist the picture of God in such a way that people are serving God out of fear. Now, through incorrect doctrines and tradition. People are being blinded to the true character, the true picture of Jesus that we should have. Just think about Adam and Eve, how simple the situation was with them. All they had to do was to believe one thing about God, and yet they decided to trust the serpent, I suppose. And just from that one thing, everything was lost. It teaches us, truth teaches us who God is. Now, I want to compare a little bit of what, during the first century when Jesus Christ was walking here on our world, what the religion of their world was compared to the religion of Jesus. So let's go over to that. Matthew chapter 23 now, and verse 4. Jesus said, "For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers." In the second verse, Matthew 23, verse 15, it says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel land and sea to win one proselyte, and when he is won, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves." I mean, think about the type of teaching that was happening at that time. It was a burden, wasn't it? The teaching at that time, it really laid a heavy weight on the shoulders of the people. And can you imagine the difference now as they were living in that type of religion when Jesus started to come along? And then he started to teach them on the Sermon on the Mount. And he started to teach them new and wonderful things. Matthew chapter 5 now, and verse 38, it says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and to take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him too. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away." Can you imagine the difference that they started to see now? As Jesus started to teach them, from the law of which they were told before to Jesus's teaching, it was all about love. And what did they start to happen? They started to get a true picture of who Jesus is. And what happened immediately as the picture of Jesus became so clear in their eyes of who he was and what God was like, what happened? They started to fall in love with him like that so quickly. So, as I said before, the truth shows us who Jesus is. How can we throw away the truth unless we start to throw away pieces of who God is? You get what I'm saying here? Now, let's move on. Jesus asked them to do things which were out of the ordinary. And the only thing you could see there was that it was dripping with love. It was God's love coming full through those teachings. And people started to fall in love with Jesus. Here's the next one, Matthew 5, verse 43. Hang on. Oh, sorry. Here we are, Matthew 5:43. It says, "You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." Boy, this is the teaching of the day. Love your neighbor, but hate your enemy. Verse 44. "But I," that is Jesus, "I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust." Wow. Can you see how true biblical teaching gives us a clear picture of who God truly is? And we know in another place it says, "If you've seen me," Jesus said, "if you've seen me, you've seen" who? The Father. So when Jesus was teaching the people, he was giving them a true picture of who God is. Jesus showed his love for us in the ultimate demonstration of his love. And what was that? He took the cross, isn't it? He took our place on the cross. True biblical doctrine shows us a beautiful picture of Jesus as he truly, truly is. But then, on the other hand, is Satan's sophistries. Our third point for today, Satan's sophistry exposed. Let's go to this quote. It's quite a long one, so just bear with me. Comes from the book Great Controversy, page 568. It is Satan's constant effort to misrepresent the character of God, the nature of sin, and the real issues at stake in the Great Controversy. His sophistry lessens the obligation of the divine law and gives men license to sin. At the same time, he causes them to cherish false conceptions of God so that they regard him with fear and hate rather than with love. The cruelty inherent in his own character is attributed to the Creator. It is embodied in systems of religion and expressed in modes of worship. Thus, the minds of men are blinded, and Satan secures them as his agents to war against God. Wow, that's a powerful comment, isn't it? That Satan is here to blind people. False accusations is the foundation of Satan's work. He loves to make a false accusation about who God is. He loves to make false accusations about who Christians are. And he stands in the background pointing and saying, oh, look at God. Look what God did. Look at the way in which the things that he did. And he does the same with Christians as well. He tries to make us look like bad people in the eyes of other people. Satan tries to rip strips off God. He likes to lower the importance of God's law, and he likes to encourage people to sin, all the time disguising himself. And with all the pain and disaster that's happening, pointing his fingers over to God, who he tries to reduce God's character. Now, the very character of Satan can be seen in doctrine that is not true. Okay? So I've been talking a lot about that. True doctrine gives us a true picture of the love of God, whereas false doctrine gives us a picture of Satan himself. Now, let's just think about a couple of false doctrines that are out there in the world today. The teaching of eternal torment. I mean, that doctrine shows a horrible picture of God, doesn't it? I mean, that doctrine, the idea that God actually uses his power to keep people alive in some place called hell, where they're burning and burning and burning for eternity, for one life of sin, maybe 70, 80 or 90 years. I mean, that's a doctrine that shows God to be absolutely terrible. What about the secret rapture doctrine? The secret rapture doctrine is a teaching in some churches that Jesus will, in some sort of strange kind of way, all the saints will disappear off the earth, and that everyone around will be like, oh, where'd all those people go? And then that's a trigger to them to say, oh, okay, now we've got 7 more years left until Jesus is going to return. And so people, the plagues start to happen and all this bad stuff has to happen on the earth. And then they know that after 7 years, Jesus is going to return. And it's like a second chance theology, isn't it? And so with this poor teaching, well, actually this false teaching, it lowers the obligation of people to obey the law. So again, another one of Satan's sophistries. Another false doctrine is Sunday sacredness. The Bible is absolutely clear, without a shadow of a doubt, that the Sabbath is the only day that God blessed and sanctified. That's the only day. Now, you think about it, all of this Christian world, most of it following a doctrine that has absolutely no biblical foundation. So what does that do? That makes people think that tradition and man's laws is more important than God's law. And so again, the same like this comment was saying, that it actually lessens the law of God and teaches people to sin. Another doctrine, the immortality of the soul. People believing that when you die, you just turn into a spirit. Excuse me. Now, again, this one is absolutely disgusting. It's related to, the eternally burning hell false doctrine as well. But think how disgusting this doctrine is. It actually makes a mockery of Jesus's resurrection. Because if we all get resurrected anyway, whether we're sinful or whether we're a saint, we all become resurrected anyway. That means Jesus's resurrection was no different to anyone else's resurrection. And so this doctrine of immortality of the soul really makes a mockery of Jesus Christ's resurrection. Now, I could keep on going and going and going with false doctrines out there that actually are part of Satan's sophistry to give us a wrong picture of God. But there's one more that I want to focus on right now, and it's one that's a little bit more sneaky. Those are the ones we sort of already know about, but this one's really, really sneaky. And I think it's best said with this quote here. It says, Great Controversy 558, love is dwelt upon as the chief attribute of God, but it is degraded to a weak sentimentalism, making little distinction between good and evil. God's justice, his denunciations of sin, the requirements of his holy law are all kept, what does it say there? Kept out of sight. Now, love is a great word, isn't it? We all enjoy the idea of love. But just like the word believe, remember earlier I was talking about the way that we can make up what the word believe means? Just like the word believe, we can also make up what the word love means, don't we? We can design what the word love means. Without the Bible, we can design what the word love means. Now, there's a lot of love out there nowadays, but I don't think it's the love that God is actually promoting. This is what I was sort of talking about earlier, and that is that this whole idea of God is love, and that's the central and only important thing that we need to keep. And let's just get rid of all of our differences so that we can all unite as one church. And let's just focus on the love of God, and let's not worry about, the law or, sin or justice. Let's just throw all that stuff out and let's just focus on how loving God is. And that sounds attractive. It sounds great. It sounds like there's nothing wrong with it. But we have to throw away parts of what we believe about God in order to do that. And that's wrong. This whole idea of joining together as one group under the banner of Jesus's love is very dangerous. And there's not a better example of it than what happened a few years ago. And I'll take you over to that now. Have a look at this. Catholics and Lutherans sign joint declaration accepting common path. Now, this is absolutely incredible. Pope Francis tells worshippers in Sweden more unites the two Christian groups than divides them. Have a look at the commentary on this, what happened. It says, the service heralded 12 months of events leading up to the 500th anniversary next year of Martin Luther nailing his 95 Theses to a church door in Wittenberg, Germany, an act that triggered the religious, political, social, and cultural evolution across Europe known as the Reformation. The anniversary presented an opportunity to mend, have a look at this, this is incredible, to mend a critical moment of our history, by moving beyond the controversies and disagreements that have often prevented us from understanding one another. He added, the separation has been an immense source of suffering and misunderstanding. he said. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. Can you believe it that they're going to say that the Reformation, that the Protestant Reformation was a misunderstanding? It was just a misunderstanding, guys. There was nothing actually dividing us. We're more alike than what we were different. And so let's come back together on the same path. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. Think of all the people who were slaughtered, people who lost their lives, people who were martyred because of their standing up for what the true picture of Jesus. They were killed because they believed in a Jesus who had a different picture to the one that the other group were preaching, and they stood up for that, and people were slaughtered because of that. And this was just a misunderstanding? I don't think so. If people had a true picture of Jesus, there would be no justification at all for the slaughtering of other people, because a true picture of Jesus does not teach that we are allowed to slaughter other people. Now, the day is coming. Fourth point, the day is coming. The day is coming, and pretty much almost must be here, when the persecution of the past may well be repeated, will be repeated. Let me just read to you from the book of Revelation, chapter 13. It says here, "When I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon, and he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great..." It just escaped off my screen. "He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who was wounded by the sword and lived. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed." Verse 16. "He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate..." Let me just turn my page. "Calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. So friends, make no mistake. The persecution that took place in the past, Revelation is telling us will happen again. There's a death decree here. It says not buy or sell. So these sorts of things are set to come back again. But I guess the question for us is, when we read the Bible and we come to understand who God is from our reading of the Bible, when we understand what it means to believe, that little word believe means so much. All the pieces of the doctrines and the understandings that we have of God tell us what that word believe means. To believe in a God of love, a God who cares, a God of compassion. Are we going to start to throw away the pieces of Jesus that we understand? When the time comes where we will be challenged to stand up for our faith, we will be asked to conform to the masses. We will be asked to turn our back on pieces and understandings of Jesus that we have, so that we can conform with the rest of the church. Will we consider standing up for Jesus an important thing, or nothing? Will we throw away our understanding of who he really is just so that we can fit in? You can't do that. You can't throw away who Jesus is. You can't change our understanding of who he is. The truth teaches us who Jesus is, and we can't throw away that understanding. I can see that many people will choose to throw away their understanding of Jesus. They will choose to throw away the Sabbath because they want to avoid persecution. They will choose to throw away parts of their understanding in Scripture so that they can form, to be in one group. But friends, may that not be us. May that not be us as we study the Bible, as we learn who Jesus is, as we see a correct picture of him. We are not to throw away those things just so that we can fit in with this idea of love, where everything else is lessened and the chief attribute of God is love. No. Let's move to our last verse. We must stay with what we have learned. And it says here, it didn't, for some reason why it didn't work, but it is the last verse. And I'm just going to stop my screen share. The last verse is 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 12. It says, "For this reason, I also suffer these things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed. For I know whom I have believed and am persuaded that he is able to keep what I have committed to him unto that day." Friends, are we going to throw away what we believe about God just so that we can fit in? Absolutely not. God has given us a true picture of him through the true understanding of the Bible. May we never throw that away. Amen. Thanks so much for listening today. I know that sermon was a little longer than normal, but thanks so much for